there's no comparison. There's no absolute comparison over there. So India's government actually sort of played a role of a facilitator. This is a very tricky question. So अभी तक ऐसा नहीं हो रहा पाकिस्तान में कि गवर्नमेंट चेंज हो जाए और वही पॉलिसी या वही हम पैकेज कंटिन्यू कर लें. एंड पाकिस्तान इज़ लाइक वन ऑफ दोज कंट्रीज. आई एम ग्लैड, लाइक आई सी द AI पॉलिसी एज अ पॉजिटिव स्टेप, राइट. Availability and access of internet is step 0, and then technology is step 1. If Obama wasn't the president of US, so would that deal still be in place or not? ना करें गाइड, उनके पास ऑलरेडी बहुत ज़्यादा लीड्स हैं. प्राइवेट सेक्टर फ्रीलांसर्स बहुत ज़्यादा कमा रहे हैं पाकिस्तान में. अगर आपने ये चीज़ भी पॉलिसी मेकर्स को दे दी ना, तो वो फ्रीलांसर्स जो है ना, उनकी इनकम आधी कट हो जाएगी. In this particular amendment, they have allowed cross-border data flows. I don't know, are we choosing Quad over China? I mean, this is a question we should explore.
Hi Kashoon, how are you doing?
Hi Faisal, I'm good. How are you?
Kashoon, first of all, thank you so much for your time. My first question is, how do you come up with this IT policy from foreign policy?
The transition.
Yeah, the transition.
Thank you for having me on this podcast platform. And the transition, I think this is a very long story, but I started off with foreign policy, basic background, bachelor's in international relations, and had an interest in national security. Got a huge exposure in terms of the main strategic matters: Afghanistan, US, Kashmir. But then I wanted to diversify and then look at the future, and the future is digital.
Yeah.
So that's when I got to know about different opportunities around technology, and I was doing this fellowship with Stimson Center, and my policy brief was on diversifying US-Pakistan relationship. So from being a security-centric relationship, could it turn towards more economic-based relations?
All right.
And could that ties be based on tech and clean energy sector? So that's when I started to, talk to policymakers in Pakistan, in Islamabad, and in Washington. So wahan se, like, it started. I talked to some people in the industry. So I found the tech space very interesting. So that's when I decided, that I should definitely move to this side. It was a risk. I frankly tell that to people because at that time I was starting to establish myself as a foreign policy analyst, right? And then there comes a time jab aap thoda bahut ho bhi jate ho established, people start to recognize you as an analyst. But then I sort of deviated from being a foreign policy analyst to a technology analyst. So yeah, but it's worth the risk. Why not?
What is that the technology analyst do? Technology policy analyst do?
Yeah, so it's similar to being a foreign policy analyst. So like in foreign policy analysis, we look at the geopolitical trends, we see what are the implications. It's similar to the technology space. You look at the developments in the technology space. क्या developments हो रही हैं, what's the future like, and then how can you sort of navigate through that space. So that's what technology analysts do. So I work more in the policy space, and interestingly I'm now working on the private side. So I switched the tables. I was initially working on the government side. This private side is even more interesting because you don't have some strings, as I could say so, right? So आपके पास मतलब इतने कोई strings नहीं होते. You have more of an open space. You have a space to criticize, a space to question things. So उसमें so it's just like you're analyzing policies for the country. You're suggesting what policy should Pakistan have for AI, for certain up and coming emerging technologies. So इस तरह का बस you just have to navigate through this space. It's similar to foreign policy. It's just yeah.
So one of my questions is that my audience might say that like ये पहली बात ये करता है कि इंडिया और पाकिस्तान, like when we talk about the security in most of the things कि हम ये कहते हैं कि ये security में इंडिया और पाकिस्तान को. So if we see India and Pakistan in tech policy lens, So where do you see India and where do you see Pakistan?
Oh, there's no comparison. There's no absolute comparison over there. You know, India started back in 1990s.
Yeah.
And we have just, you know, begin with this particular niche. So definitely there's no comparison. I might be building some analogies over this course of discussion, but I personally think that this is not a fair comparison. India mature technology space hai or technology economy
What
hai.
have they actually done in the 90s?
A lot of things. So matlab, obviously the future is digital, the future has technology tech opportunities, right? How do you capitalize on those opportunities? So obviously the private sector is already capitalizing, right? They're grabbing those opportunities, working in the tech space and sort of using that to transform the lives around us. But how can the government sort of play a role in it, right? So India's government actually sort of played a role of a facilitator. So, you know, back in 1990s, what they did was, जो अब हम अब कर रहे हैं, हम STC parks बना रहे हैं, special technology parks बना रहे हैं, अब जाके उनने ये वाले models तब 1990s में implement कर दिए. They saw that, you know, software services को export करना is a potential opportunity that they have, and they started exporting it. So they introduced a special export scheme for it. So they were facilitating the industry itself. हम अब जाके सोच रहे हैं कि यार this is a potential space and this could help our economy grow, so let's facilitate it. We haven't facilitated it yet. So India allows digital payments. It allows an ecosystem which is very predictable, very conducive to business friendly, right? And the government sort of enables that environment. That's what they did. And we have just started thinking about it. We're just like beginning at that.
So do you think that our government and the successive governments that we like, you know, we have some changing government pattern, like once there comes and we get it changed, so they have like, they continue those policies or they change those policies, and how, which government was serious, like the previous two, one of the previous two governments?
This is a very tricky question. You know, I don't have a straight answer for this, but yes, one of the key interventions that I propose, and you know, even through my workplace or as a policy analyst, is to ensure policy consistency. As you said, governments change, policies disappear, they stay in limbo, they're not carried forward or followed through, and which is why the industry or the larger space suffers, right? Policies have to be continued, right? So अभी तक ऐसा नहीं हो रहा पाकिस्तान में कि गवर्नमेंट चेंज हो जाए और वही पॉलिसी या वही हम पैकेज कंटिन्यू कर लें, बिकॉज यू नो पैकेजेस भी पोलिटिसाइज हो जाते हैं. बट आई थिंक कि देयर इज नो वन political party which has prioritized tech space, or you know, is thinking to do so. I think largely अब national security space में भी और Islamabad Pindi में ये thinking, there's this sense that technology is like the way forward for Pakistan's economy, and they've started to put some focus on technology. You know, just in the last days, a couple of days before the budget was announced, and then our finance minister also said that one of the sectors that we should prioritize is IT sector, right? The technology sector. So there, 2 years back, we were not seeing that in the budget speech, right? Although there was a special package announced by the former government, it wasn't continued, right? So that's the tragedy. So each government has a role to play, but the policies are not continued. Then again, one political party might have better understanding of the space than the other, but that should not stop us from navigating, right? Or from introducing certain policies. Like, it shouldn't be dependent on political parties and their hold on the government.
How much are we serious about AI?
Yeah, in terms of the government space.
In overall space, like the corporate sector and the government as well.
Oh, the corporate sector is already thriving in that space, right? So the corporate sector knows the potential, the relevance of the space. They're already practicing that. The government sector has just woken up to the relevance and potential of AI. And I tell you that this is not only Pakistan. This phenomenon is happening globally.
Yeah.
So you would see that in 2016 there was only one bill that was passed into law related to AI technologies. But in 2022, 37 bills have been passed into law. So you
In
see
Pakistan?
no, globally.
Yeah, okay,
So
all
aapka
right.
ye AI index analysis tells us that that's the number of policies that or laws that have been made in the last couple of years for AI related technologies. So globally the policy makers are waking up to the potential of AI, and they are starting to look at this space more carefully. And then there are mixed speculations. So Zimbabwe type countries jo hain, they would think let's use AI for weather forecasting. But then there are countries like India or countries like regions like EU. They are speculating, and they're skeptical about the risk that AI led automation brings with it, right?
Yeah.
And then even in the last couple of days, there were some conversations about big tech companies saying that AI might be harmful for the mankind, right? So these are the speculations. So we have like a mixed space. So the corporate sector is definitely invested in. The policy sector globally has now become invested in it, and Pakistan is like one of those countries. I'm glad, like I see the AI policy as a positive step, right? Because the space has been uncharted, and we're not saying to regulate that space, right? This should never be taken as a message to regulate that space. Let the industry breathe. But definitely, when it comes to risk and potential harmful implications, definitely keep a watch out. That does not mean you excessively start regulating that space.
So how do you think that in Pakistan, especially we have like a youth bulge, right? So उनको कैसे skilled किया जा सकता है? और आप ये देखें कि हम बहुत सारे young लोग हैं जो कि services provide कर रहे हैं, but they are doing on their own, right?
Yeah.
हम यहाँ पे तो इंटरनेट भी बंद कर देते हैं, ठीक है? रिसेंट हुआ, उससे पहले हमने लाइक 4 साल यूट्यूब को नहीं चलाया। तो अगर इस तरह से अगर गवर्नमेंट सीरियस है, तो आप क्या समझती हैं कि ये फ्यूचर में भी ये पॉलिसीज ऐसे कंटिन्यू करेंगे या कुछ ना कुछ लोगों को करने देंगे?
I think करने देंगे. I'm optimistic about the future. So, I mean, we have had instances in the past, or very recent though. Internet was blocked. उससे पहले Wikipedia was banned. So, but this actually stems from the fact that the policymakers don't have larger understanding of the technology space, right? So unko this is beyond them. These are, and if I could tell you frankly, these are people who are near to their retirement age. This is a different generation. They don't understand the technology, and we have this tendency in Pakistan that if we don't tend to understand something, we tend to block it, right? So that's what they did. They couldn't understand YouTube, ब्लॉक कर दिया. विकीपीडिया का कंटेंट नहीं ठीक लग रहा था, तो इंस्टेड कि आप उस सर्टन पेज को ब्लॉक करवा देते या इस तरह एडिटर्स को रीच आउट करते, आपने पूरा विकीपीडिया बैन कर दिया, राइट? सो वो स्पेस को नेविगेट करना अभी तक उनको नहीं समझ आ रहा, राइट? बट आहिस्ता आहिस्ता एज वी मूव फॉरवर्ड, they have started to realize that this is not how we can move forward, right? We cannot completely ban social media and put a blockade on internet and say that the country has has a tech space, and they can, because you also have a country's perception. We have a couple of companies who were told by investors that you don't even have internet. So how are you going to provide us services, right? So perception can never be एक damage ऐसा है कि it's an irreversible damage, right? It cannot be, it might take years to recover from it. So now the policymakers are beginning to realize that this is something that cannot be recovered, and that's something that they cannot just in the blink of an eye, they cannot take these measures and get away with it. Yeah.
Still in the peripheries, like the internet speed is too slow. It seems like you are 10 years behind normal. Like when I come, personally I'm from periphery, so when I come to the capital, then I can see the internet speed difference.
हाँ,
तो ये भी तो मसले मसाइल हैं
ये
यहाँ पे.
बेसिक हैं. Yes,
Yeah.
we have to get the basics right. So policy consistency is basic. Having a stable internet is basic, right? हम 5G networks उनकी बात कर रहे होते हैं, but you're right, there's no access and availability काफ़ी limited है. Broadband users की काफ़ी limited है. The telecom sector finds it difficult to sort of enable digital transformation for the rest of the citizens in this country. But I think, like, let's keep a positive outlook. मुश्किल है, हो रहा है. I think we're in the right direction, so we'll get there. Also थोड़ा सा understanding भी policy makers की अब होना start हुई है, and अब होनी भी चाहिए. फॉर इंस्टेंस AI पॉलिसी की हम बात कर रहे हैं, तो उसमें उनने एक वन पिलर ऑफ द AI पॉलिसी टॉक्स अबाउट मार्केट इनेबलमेंट, एंड दे आर सेइंग कि सेंटर ऑफ एक्सेलेंस उसमें बना देंगे, राइट? सो वी डोंट नीड टू पुट अप अ फिजिकल स्ट्रक्चर for the industry or for the particular technology niche to thrive. आप इंडिया की वो नेशनल स्ट्रैटेजी फॉर AI देख लेना, सो दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, राइट? डेफिनेटली टॉकिंग अबाउट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, बट दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट computing infrastructure, enabling 5G networks and data solution, marketplaces. So this is the sort of infrastructure that we need to talk about, not physical infrastructures. And then, so definitely I agree with you that availability and access of internet is step 0. And then technology is step 1. So we have to fix that space, get the basics right, and then move forward.
Kashoon, how do you see the role of technology parks? Actually, we are sitting in a technology park, and what role do you see? And like, how can it help like more people in that, or more startups?
I think technology parks have a huge role to play. So for one, they give them, space in Pakistan, you have to look it from a perspective that you're a freelancer or you are a person with 3 people companies, right?
Yeah.
And you need a space to sit and work. So आपको एक ऐसा space मिल रहा है जहाँ पे आपको internet guaranteed है, आपको आपकी space guaranteed है, and other facilities, you're guaranteed those facilities, and you're just going there and sitting and working there, right? So even during the times of disruption, these parks were making sure that internet is available, right? Through VPN or other sources. इस तरह की certain measures हैं जो technology parks enable करते हैं, right? Technology parks is a mean and not an end in itself, right? So you use it as a mean to put out the exports, the technology services or the products that we are bringing to the world. So as a mean, it is a crucial element. It is not an end in itself.
अच्छा, AI policy के we have talked about AI. So AI policy के क्या benefits हो सकते हैं? Like for a layman like me, ये क्या benefits हो सकते हैं?
AI policy के as such, देखो AI space के
implementation of AI policy, right? कि कैसे कितनी implementation हुई है?
Implementation में ना, so again, that's something के पॉलिसी का सब्सटेंस क्या है, फिर उस पर डिपेंड करता है कि उसकी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन कितनी होनी चाहिए, कितनी नहीं, राइट? सो पहले तो हमें अभी, क्योंकि पॉलिसी वो ड्राफ्ट पॉलिसी आई है, अभी उसके कंसल्टेशंस हो रहे हैं, राउंड ऑफ कंसल्टेशंस. वी हैव टू एग्री ऑन द सब्सटेंस एंड देन वी मूव टूवर्ड्स इम्प्लीमेंटेशन ऑफ इट. दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट मार्केट इनेबलमेंट, so that's great, right? How do you enable the whole market in the AI space? They're talking about awareness for the larger audience, and the larger audience should actually include people who are non-technical, right? So one of the challenges that I saw in the policy was that unne public awareness में target 1 industry को रखा हुआ. Industry already know the potential of AI, right? It's the other non-technical sectors that need to know. For instance, policy makers, उनने target 4 उसको रखा हुआ. I think it should be target 1. That policy makers should understand the AI potential and जो उसके basically the concept of it, and we can always move forward from that. So I think the policy is a step forward in only bringing about it's only navigating the place and enabling that place. So as long as they're bringing in the right infrastructure and right infrastructure center of excellence, nahi, 5G networks, data privacy rights, right? So ये वाली क्योंकि AI में भी उनने बात की है इसकी data privacy की, but I still have to read it thoroughly कि data privacy का उन्होंने क्या क्या लिखा हो, क्योंकि this is something which is required in length, right? So yeah.
आपका डेटा प्रोटेक्टेड है?
ये तो मुझे नहीं लगता अभी किसी का भी पाकिस्तान में है. I'm just only kidding. I'm joking. Companies and corporates in Pakistan have data protection rights, and data on the private side, data is protected to a great extent.
Like individuals का फिर I'm still over there.
Yeah.
Protected है. So you think protected है?
Mixed space है, yeah. ये तो अब वैसे हर किसी को पता चल गया ना रिकॉर्डिंग सुन के तो.
अच्छा आप you have come up from a social sciences background, right? What were the things that you were surprised to know that when you came up in IT sector? That really, oh, that's so surprising for you.
A lot of things. I think the tech sector itself, it's so, it's magical in some ways, right? So chat GPT, मतलब आपके पूरे काम कर देते हैं, आप बस बैठे हुए हैं. इस तरह के AI models, automation models, वो which is very basic, so उसमें इतना वो नहीं surprise elements नहीं होते. But just when you part of my job is to basically interact with the companies and the corporates in Pakistan and resolve the policy issues that they have. But once I get to understand their business, it's a new concept for me, right? So it's a wide domain. There's metaverse, there's game industry that we never knew about. I personally, didn't have a deeper understanding of that sector. Animations, आपके पास AI है, cloud computing है, cyber security. If you dive deeper into these and आप उनकी जो businesses understand करते हैं, so it blows away your mind कि क्या क्या हो रहा है पाकिस्तान में और हमें पता भी नहीं था.
So you might get envious of that, like where were we at that time?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it envious. I would just say, I'm glad I got introduced to this space. Yeah.
Like you don't think that you should have been into, like you should have done IT degree instead of doing.
No, I don't think so. I like policy work. Yeah. So I like the technology space, but even like within the space, I like doing policy work.
What was that you have been doing in the foreign policy and that you enjoyed the most?
अच्छा, so there's a lot. I really enjoyed my previous job. So वहाँ पे
Are you planning to go back?
The whole team is gone. So I don't think I can. But no, I think we're still doing the work that we used to do there, and each one of us is still bringing, making an impact on one way or the other. But I truly enjoyed the work. National security space जो है वो मुझे तो बहुत ज़्यादा exposure मिला था वहाँ पे. We worked on US-Pakistan relationships. We worked on Kashmir. So national security matters, which were which we used to study about in theory. So उन पे जब काम करना and practice करना, so it was very interesting, yeah. And also like sort of connecting this national security through the digital space. So that's something that we definitely enjoyed doing there, because national security space Pakistan में अभी तक वो digital adoption नहीं हुई, क्योंकि especially on the government side, right? So policy makers तो definitely digital adopt ही नहीं किया ना. So वहाँ पे start करना, bringing this digital transformation in that space, also bringing women voices in that space. Women already existed there, right? But it's more of a space which is dominated by a certain gender, right? So, and then we used to work on projects which would bring women in nuclear technology or women in foreign policy. So we also worked on one project which was which was led by a former parliamentarian secretary, Malika Bukhari, and my previous mentor as well, Dr. Hussain Nadeem. So they were working on this project which was to make justice more accessible to victims of gender-based violence through tech. So उसमें basically they made this Darul Imams जो हैं उनको accessible कर दिया through a dashboard. So you could actually open up a dashboard and see कि कौन सी जगह पे कितने Darul Imam हैं and how can you sort of contact them and reach out to them. And that was just step one. So you know. In interesting spaces that we have certain behaviors, and policymakers also have this niche. They act in certain ways. So, for instance, you know, Modi would Balakot strikes जो हैं वो कभी होते अगर Modi wouldn't have been the president of India, prime minister of India. I mean, that's a question that we can ask ourselves. जो Iran-US nuclear deal हुई थी, had क्या अगर if Obama wasn't the president of US, so would that deal still be in place or not? So policymakers bring their own behaviors, their own ideologies in the policy making space. And sometimes using technology, we can definitely understand those behaviors. And that's a very interesting space.
Then they can be objective, like that policy can be made objective.
That policy can be predicted. The behaviors can be predicted.
So through AI, like
oh, you can definitely, yeah, certain models. So it's a very interesting space.
Yeah, like bringing tech into the
national security. Yeah.
So that's really interesting. Acha, let's come back to IT. IT and policy making. There's this one question that always comes from people that who have been into freelancing or they know the editing, video editing, animations, this thing, and they're really interested that how they can acquire international clients. There's this thing that is lacking. Is there any policy or is there any that you can like या जो आपकी कंपनीज हैं जो यहाँ पे पार्क्स हैं ये काम कर रही हैं, सो इस चीज़ में लोगों को गाइड कर सकें?
ना करें गाइड. उनके पास ऑलरेडी बहुत ज़्यादा लीड्स हैं. प्राइवेट सेक्टर फ्रीलांसर्स बहुत ज़्यादा कमा रहे हैं पाकिस्तान में. अगर आपने ये चीज़ भी पॉलिसी मेकर्स को दे दी ना तो वो फ्रीलांसर्स जो है ना उनकी इनकम आधी कट हो जाएगी.
तो ये टैक्सेस वैसे कब लगा रहे हैं फ्रीलांसर्स पे?
मेरे ख्याल में अभी लग गए होंगे.
नहीं, अभी तक तो नहीं लगे क्योंकि
स्पेस अनचार्टेड है. हाँ,
तो आपने आगे बताना नहीं है उनको.
हमने बता दिया अभी सबके सामने आपने.
ठीक है. तो अच्छा, पेपॉल क्यों नहीं आ रहा? ये भी आपने बताया उनको?
Certain issues, I wouldn't call them issues, I would just call them challenges. Certain challenges that need to be addressed. But I would tell you an interesting fact that even if PayPal hasn't come to Pakistan, there are other digital platforms that have. So PayMob, a company hai, which is actually also sitting in this building, is acquired. Sure. Is also that is acquired, and I think investment उसमें.
Sorry, pay what?
PayMob.
PayMob
उसका नाम है कंपनी का, and उसमें higher investment PayPal ने की हुई है.
अच्छा.
And they are the only financial platform in Pakistan जिसमें PayPal has invested. They are primarily working in Middle East और वहाँ पे services provide कर रहे हैं, but the team itself is from Pakistan. एक startup है, but PayPal acquired. So I mean, local companies have started to sort of fill that space. So I also see that as a positive development.
अच्छा, इस बजट में कौन सी ऐसी चीज़ें इंटरेस्टिंग जो हैं फॉर आईटी सेक्टर ऐसी डेवलपमेंट्स हुई हो?
इंटरेस्टिंग डेवलपमेंट्स इतनी कोई actually this is my personal opinion and not the opinion of my organization. But I personally think that the budget, this 2023 budget itself is operational in nature. So and पूरे साल negotiations, rounds of discussions हुए और फिर ये budget आया. Policy level के कुछ changes थे जो आने चाहिए थे, right, इस budget में. But इसमें आपने वो consistency of policy की हम बात कर रहे थे, तो taxation regime for the IT and ITES companies, they the final tax regime, they are subjected to the final tax regime, the technology export-oriented corporates. So that regime itself is continued till 2026. Previously, we saw that in the last 3 years, the taxation policy changed every year.
Every
So
year.
yeah, so that's somewhat of a development, but all the other changes are they are duty related, they are sales tax related. Kuch automation हमने process we suggested to automate the process. So the process itself is that was accepted, included in the budget. An interesting aspect was that there is a special fund which is introduced for the venture capitalists and जो startups हैं उनके लिए. So, I mean, these are some, but I see this budget as at a very operational level. This is something कि आप बस ease of doing business enable करने के लिए कुछ changes हैं जो आपको policy level पे करने हैं और कुछ operational level पे करने हैं. और अभी operational level पे हैं ताकि आप business operations को थोड़ा सा breathe करने दें, companies को थोड़ा सा business operations को ease कर दें. ये बजट सिर्फ इस तरह की चेंजेस अलाउ कर रहा है.
अच्छा, कौन सी ऐसी चीज़ें हैं जो कि पाकिस्तान में या ग्लोबली हो रही हैं रेलेवेंट टू आईटी जो कि दैट कैन बी यूज्ड टू काउंटर क्लाइमेट चेंज?
वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग.
क्लाइमेट चेंज मेरे बिल्कुल दिल के पास है कि ये इस चीज़ पे काम होना चाहिए. एंड आई आस्क दिस क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम ऑलमोस्ट एवरी गेस्ट कि आईटी में अब आप यू आर इन आईटी, तो कौन सी ऐसी चीज़ें हो रही हैं कि जो क्लाइमेट चेंज को काउंटर करने के लिए हेल्प कर रही हैं?
हाँ, इसको सो आई थिंक अ लॉट ऑफ वर्क इज हैपनिंग on the side of green technology. Solar technology पे हम non-renewable technology पे focus किया जा रहा है globally as well. Pakistan also has started to deviate its attention towards that. To what extent is again another debate. But again also like it's a different debate actually. But focus उस तरफ होना शुरू हुआ है. But solar technology is definitely a space to look at. Wind technology, these are non-renewable technology areas that can help Pakistan. Carbon trading there is a phenomenon that is happening around the world, and that's something when I was actually जो policy brief that I wrote for Stimson Center actually included US-Pakistan relationship around clean tech. And I suggested that Pakistan and US should enable carbon trading with each other, so that Pakistan will have more funds for the climate oriented projects. So basically the concept works that there are some countries who have more carbon, who emit more carbon than the other, right? Carbon emissions ka level they have is higher than the other countries. They're very highly industrialized, UK, India, Canada, and countries like these, US. But these countries, so climate, obviously,
they're
it works in
contributing more to the
exactly
climate change,
and then countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh are basically suffering from it, although they're not contributing that much, right? So the carbon credit concept works in a way that these countries have to sort of they sort of use carbon credits. They use that carbon credits to emit more emissions, and then they sort of give funds to the countries for carbon related projects. So इस तरह का like एक पूरा concept है. So उसमें Pakistan can definitely, so we're a country like Pakistan which have financing issues, right? So they can definitely benefit from projects like these, जिसमें they could also finance climate related projects. In fact, there's a very interesting project going on. There was a fund recently announced by the US Embassy in the technology sector, and they are asking the game, animation, and graphics sector to come up with proposals, and they're going to give grants to build a nexus between climate change and national security, right? उसमें क्या कर रहे हैं कि for instance they can raise awareness, create a game for climate change, and that's one way of raising awareness, right? Or create an animation on how climate change could be mitigated. So these are certain proposals that have been pitched to the company, to the corporates, and it's still the proposals have yet to come out. So but that's something that I'm really looking forward to. I see that as a very positive development, that these are funds which are exclusively dedicated to climate change, and there's a nexus built between the gaming and animation sector and climate change, and that I don't think that has happened before previously in Pakistan.
Acha, Kashoon, let's discuss about the Data Protection Bill 2023. So, what are some of the developments that you think that they are good developments?
Yeah, so the 2023 bill is basically building on the 2018 bill, right?
All right.
But there's one major development that I personally see as a major development. In this particular amendment, they have allowed cross-border data flows. And there's a huge debate going on around the world about data localization or unrestricted flow of data. So countries like US and Japan say, let the data flow across countries and across borders unrestricted.
But do you think that, sorry to cut you,
Yeah.
do you think that China would allow this? I don't think.
What allows it?
China.
So I was just
You were
coming to
coming-
that. So
okay.
countries like China are saying that extreme data localization, they monitor data excessively and others. So and then there's some countries maybe like Pakistan or EU
Developing.
who are trying to find a space for themselves. This is just like the Cold War era,
Yeah,
right? And
okay.
this is like a miniature form of Cold War era.
Yeah.
When we used to think that you either side with US or you either side with Russia. So usme like this is a balance that you have to strike, right? So now you either have excessive data localization or you have unrestricted flow. But then how do you sort of build a balance? And most, because this is no longer a Cold War era, right? This is a free world. So countries have now started to approach this from a very balanced perspective. And so India also is now have started to incline towards data localization. जब हमारा bill आया 2023 का, तब India का भी आया है और हमने we allowed cross border data flows. India inclined more towards, they're reversing
the
it.
process, right?
Yeah. And they are basically thinking that they can leverage that data for their national interests. But we should not think that. The reason is because, again, वही बात है, India is not a it's not a fair comparison, right?
Yeah.
Because they started off very early.
They're far ahead than
they're
us.
far ahead than us. It's a $200 billion industry, right? So industry क्या, it's just export remittances जो हैं उनके export proceeds is 200 billion. The industry itself is huge.
Yeah. Actually, they are the backbone of the US IT sector.
Yeah, diversify हो रहे हैं, supply chains India में आके खुल रहे हैं, Apple and what not.
Yeah.
All are opening their units in India. So so again, like no comparison.
Yeah, right.
But data protection में, so India की बहुत एक interesting सी चीज़ है कि उनने they are allowing consented data sharing. So consented data sharing में ये है कि, for instance, if you are an entity who wants to access my data and I'm a citizen, right? So you will actually ask me for my permission to share data with you. And this all happens digitally. This is a digital flow where an entity will request data from a citizen, and I will electronically sign and give permission to give my access to my data. And that too, data has a retention limitation. So for instance, I'll give you 5 days to use my data, and after that data is
that time would expire.
हाँ, data भी expire हो जाएगा, आपके पास नहीं रहेगा क्योंकि वो सारा logged है electronically, end to end encrypted है. So इस तरह के, so even if we are ensuring that there are cross border data flows, उसमें how do you ensure that it's it's somewhat navigated, right? So end-to-end encryptions आप कर लें, क्योंकि again we were also on data localization side, right? So अभी this is just a development that has occurred. Our companies all actually have major challenges related to that. So most of our companies have clients in UK and US and other countries, and then these countries, whenever they're signing contracts, these countries ask them to cite data protection laws. So that obviously
GDPR,
party wants to
GDPR,
ऐसा. So वो अब and the issue comes that these are bills and not laws. Law is only like, we only have PICA law, right? And so wahan pe that's where the issue comes in, because then they need to make sure that the company is accountable and they're auditable hai, data flows and everything, and fair enough in business. But I think this is again something that we need to navigate. But cross-border data flows will only be allowed if the other country, if the other counterpart has a certain data protection policy. So, and here's an interesting element. ये तो इसका domestic element था, right? So data localization करनी है या नहीं. Another element, and you're also like, foreign relations student, so you would know the Quad versus China paradigm, right? So, and Quad was, when I was doing this research for Stimson Center, I actually met and interviewed a few people through Stimson who basically told us that the Quad companies, the Quad countries are actually now introducing investment promotion platforms and policies. So all the Quad companies, the countries like Japan ho gaya, US ho gaya, they would have similar policies, right? Ek certain similar policies hongi, they adhere to certain principles, and if you don't, so you're not part of that group, right? So obviously business would not come to that place if the principles are not, followed.
Yeah.
So usme I think this is maybe I don't know, are we choosing Quad over China? I mean, this is a question we should explore. I don't think we are. I mean, there's a different answer.
Kashoon, how would the digital wars look like?
I think they're already somewhat happening. Yeah. Like the US elections that happened, and there was a conspiracy that Russia meddled in the elections, and that too through through digital means.
And would the reports come in? And like that,
yeah, I mean, again, that's also already happening, because people are Siri, Alexa, I mean, these are AI models, and we give our excessive information to them, even on social media platforms and everything. Remember that we were talking about behaviors. So behaviors can easily be judged and can easily be
manipulated as well.
But they can be categorized, and they can be studied and predicted. And that's what US elections, that's what happened in the US elections, that they predicted what the US citizens would do through their social media behaviors.
That's dangerous, actually.
That's dangerous, yes. Yeah. I mean, I might have a personal opinion on it, but yeah.
All right. Acha, Kashoon, let's come up the actual session 2, and that is, how do you do your research?
How do I do my research?
Yeah.
I mean, that's simple, like how all researchers do. Depends, like
you have differentiated yourself, and you have come up from foreign policy to tech, then you have something different that you do.
No, I think it's similar to everyone.
You do more hard work in that.
No, I think everyone should keep a watch out for opportunities. So, yeah, especially in your 20s, always look for new opportunities and new learnings. Like we have this tendency that sometimes we think, and this is a human nature, right? That we reach a place and then we become complacent. So complacency, jo hai na, sometimes it kills your opportunities.
Like the way we are doing.
नहीं, हम ठीक नहीं कर रहे ना, हम complacent हो जाते हैं. Complacent नहीं होना चाहिए. Curious होना चाहिए. थोड़ी,
Acha, which is that one book that you have been reading, or you have read so many times?
None. I have this. I never read a book again and again. But yeah.
अभी कौन सी book पढ़ रही हैं?
I don't find, I recently मुझे कोई time नहीं मिला book पढ़ने का, and this is like a bad thing. I want to revive my reading habit, but there is this one book which I really found interesting, or Daniel Kahneman, or what, that's maybe the name, but it's Thinking Fast and Slow. The author's name is not so clear to me right now, but that's a really good book. It talks about your behaviors and your decision making process. So that's very interesting. It actually, if you're working in the in a space where you have to interact with other people and your work sometimes depend on their behaviors and their decision making and their thinking, then you should definitely read that book, because then you can actually predict what they are doing, and also like it's a good book when if you're in the decision making space. मजे किया.
और कौन सी आपकी फेवरेट ऑल टाइम फेवरेट बुक्स में से है?
ऑल टाइम फेवरेट बुक्स मेरी कोई भी नहीं है.
कोई भी नहीं है? ऑथर भी कोई नहीं है?
ऑथर आई रीड जो मुझे फैसिनेट करता है, या इट्स नॉट लाइक आई हैव वन फेवरेट ऑथर.
डू यू वॉच मूवीज?
Yeah. Do I look like a boring person to you?
Let's come to that.
Yeah.
कौन सी मूवी फेवरेट है आपकी?
Again, कोई favorite. I see that as a form of entertainment, so I see everything.
किस तरह की वीडियोस
मूवीज
देखती हैं?
also जो भी आती हैं नई जो नई रिलीज हो जाएगी देख लूँगी. सीजन्स में अभी तक मैंने अभी रिसेंटली मैंने देखा है बॉडीगार्ड, विच इज़ अगैन मतलब काफ़ी पुराना है. बॉडीगार्ड और डिप्लोमैट. सो बेसिकली डिप्लोमैट देखा, एल्गोरिदम ने उसे बताया कि ये पसंद है तो उसने बॉडीगार्ड ऊपर कर दिया. सो बोथ ऑफ दीज आर अगैन अबाउट पॉलिसी मेकिंग स्पेसेस. या बट उसके अलावा भी देखती हूँ काफ़ी.
इसके अलावा और कुछ कहना चाहेंगी?
नहीं.
ऑलराइट, थैंक यू काशून सो मच फॉर योर टाइम. आपने इतनी इंटरेस्टिंग डिस्कशन की हमारे साथ.
नो, थैंक यू फॉर हैविंग मी.